The 1966 penny coin, officially known as the 1966 Lincoln cent, may seem like an ordinary and insignificant piece of currency at first glance, yet it carries an unusually deep, complex, and layered story that reflects a critical moment in American history, economics, and everyday life. Because this small copper coin was produced during a period of intense national pressure, social transformation, and economic uncertainty, quietly circulating through a society struggling to balance tradition and change. In 1966, the United States was deeply involved in the Vietnam War. Civil rights movements were reshaping laws and social norms, inflation was rising, and public trust in institutions was being tested. While millions of Americans continued their daily routines of working, commuting, shopping, and raising families, unknowingly using a coin that would later become a historical marker of that turbulent decade, the Lincoln cent itself had already become one of the most familiar and trusted symbols of American money by the mid-1960s. Having been introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth, and for more than half a century it had remained a constant presence in American pockets, purses, cash registers, and savings jars, making the 1966 penny part of a long and continuous monetary tradition. The obverse of the 1966 penny features the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, showing Lincoln facing right with a calm, reflective expression that conveys strength and dignity, surrounded by the inscriptions, "In God We Trust" along the top rim, "Liberty" on the left, and the date 1966 on the right, all struck into a copper-based planchette that gives the coin its warm reddish-brown tone and substantial feel. Unlike modern pennies that are made primarily of zinc with a thin copper coating, the 1966 penny belongs entirely to the classic copper era. Composed of approximately 95% copper and weighing about 3.11 grams, a composition that not only gives it greater heft, but also ties it physically to generations of earlier American coins, making it feel more solid and enduring in the hand. The reverse side of the coin displays the Lincoln Memorial, design introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, symbolizing remembrance, unity, and national identity, and within the engraved columns of the memorial sits a tiny seated statue of Lincoln himself, a detail so small, yet so precise, that it continues to impress collectors and historians decades later. One of the most historically significant features of the 1966 penny is the complete absence of a mint mark, a result of a rare and deliberate decision by the U.S. Mint to remove mint marks from all coins produced between 1965 and 1967 in response to a nationwide coin shortage, an effort meant to discourage hoarding, but one that ultimately created a unique category of coins that still sparks curiosity and discussion among numismatists. During this period, the mint was operating under extreme pressure to produce enormous quantities of coins as quickly as possible. Running long shifts and extended production cycles to keep up with demand, and these intense conditions increased the likelihood of minor errors, die wear, unusual strikes, and subtle variations that would later become points of interest for collectors searching for something out of the ordinary. For everyday Americans in 1966, however, the penny remained a humble and practical tool used to buy candy, newspapers, postage stamps, and small necessities dropped into tip jars, fed into vending machines, used in parking meters, or saved casually in jars and drawers, rarely examined closely and often forgotten once spent. As the decades passed and the 1966 penny gradually disappeared from active circulation, replaced by newer coins and changing spending habits, collectors began to reevaluate its place in history, recognizing it as a product of a uniquely stressful economic moment just before rising metal prices would begin forcing major changes to the composition of U.S. coinage. While the vast majority of 1966 pennies remain common and modest in value today, particularly in circulated condition, interest has steadily grown around exceptionally well-preserved examples, rare minting errors, and coins with unusual characteristics. And in some high-level collector discussions, Extraordinary specimens have even been spoken of in speculative terms involving values reaching into the millions of dollars when rarity, condition, and historical importance align in a perfect and nearly impossible combination. Whether these million-dollar valuations are tied to confirmed sales, private transactions, or collector legend, they capture the imagination and reinforce the powerful idea that even the smallest and most familiar objects can sometimes hold extraordinary worth. Beyond questions of monetary value, the 1966 penny carries cultural, emotional, and symbolic significance because it represents continuity during chaos, stability during uncertainty, and the quiet persistence of everyday life during a decade defined by conflict, protest, and transformation. When narrated slowly in a text-to-speech format, the story of the 1966 penny becomes immersive and almost meditative, guiding listeners through history, economics, craftsmanship, and human curiosity, and revealing how a single copper coin moved silently through millions of hands before emerging years later as a meaningful artifact of its time, reminding us that history is not only written in books and monuments, but also preserved in the smallest objects we once carried without ever realizing their future importance.